Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. I've been excited about this conversation because our guest today has actually been leading a double life, CRNA by day and wine connoisseur by night. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dennis Fraley. Dennis hails from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he obtained a BA in chemistry from Washington and Jefferson College and a master's in anesthesia from La Roche College. He's resided in Florence, South Carolina, just south of me, for the last 20 years, where he currently works as a certified registered nurse anesthetist. His budding interest in wine led him to seek further education via the Wine and Spirits Education Trust. He completed his intermediate and advanced level in Charleston, South Carolina, where he graduated with distinction. He went on to achieve the WSET Diploma of Wine and Spirits through the Neil Ewing School of Wine in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and is currently revising for the entry exam to the Institute of Masters of Wine. Along the way, he also achieved the Certified Specialist of Wine designation and French Wine Scholar. He is currently working with the American Wine Society to become a certified wine judge. Dennis teaches wine classes, performs guided educational tastings, works with local chefs performing food and wine pairing events, and is a recurring judge for the Commissioner's Cup Kentucky State Wine Competition. His monthly wine column, Bottle Talk, has enjoyed now 7 years of publication through the Florence Morning News and www.scnow.com. So Dennis, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it.
So, I just want to dive right in with you here. Let's talk about how your different careers have intertwined.
Well, I mean, I guess you heard from the startup there, your entry, that I'm was always a chemistry geek. So it sort of wine sort of checked that box as well. And I do I very much do appreciate the chemistry behind the wine and spirits industry. It really intertwines also with the idea that I like to teach and I like to interact with people. And as a CRNA that we have about, depending on how long your pre-op interviews are, you have about maybe 90 to 120 seconds to get someone to trust you with their life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with wine, it's not quite so severe, but I think there's a truth that comes through when you're talking to people, especially when you're talking to them on their level. And I don't mean that as a derogatory term of their amount of their wine education, but I think in the wine industry, professionals, and I use that term loosely, do a little bit of a disservice with creating this vocabulary that they want to show you how much they know and how much you don't know. And that sort of rings, it comes through as being a little dishonest for the end consumer. So I think there's that element, that human element that comes through. And, like I said, I'm also have an Irish heritage, and we like to drink. And it's one of those things. And what we do for a living, so that's one of the reasons why as well.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that I do go to great lengths to justify my bad habits, and I believe we all can do that through a certain amount of education. So if you're drinking wine or bourbon or something that night, you can do it in the name of education rather than for another reason. So rationalization is a powerful thing, right?
Yeah, well, nothing wrong with that in moderation for sure. So, I want to ask a real basic question.
Absolutely.
How is this different from being a sommelier?
Okay, that's a great question. And it often gets confused. I have a lot of people come up and say, okay, so you're a sommelier. And I think largely that was driven because of Somm the movie and those types of things. There are many different wine educational bodies in this country, but there's two main ones internationally, and that's the Court of Master Sommeliers, and that's the Wine and Spirits Education Trust. Now, we have a lot of similarities with blind tastings and a lot of knowledge with areas and rules and regulations and all that stuff. But I think the main difference is the sommeliers actually do a lot of service. So they're very much into food and wine pairing and service elements and those types of things. And I knew I was never going to work in a restaurant, never going to go the service route. WSET, not only did they focus a lot on the chemistry behind the production, winemakers' choices, viticulture, but they also focus on the global wine industry and how that all fits together. There's a lot of moving parts in that. So there's a large part of it is a business aspect behind the wine and spirits industry as well, which I find very interesting.
Okay. Well, that's pretty cool. So when did you actually decide, hey, this is something that I want to pursue in addition to what I already do? I want to pursue professional education in this.
I think the seed was planted well before anesthesia school. I was working as a nurse, and actually as a nursing student, and I was moonlighting with sort of a friend of a friend who was an oral surgeon, and his brothers were there, and they'd been in the business for a long time. He was very much into wine and food, and working for him, he invited me to his house, and he and his wife did this amazing dinner, and he kept bringing out course after course. And he obviously thought a lot about the food and wine pairings behind that. And he came out and explained the wine, talked about it, and why he paired it with the course, and we tried them together. And I think that was my aha moment, that I tasted the wine and tasted the food and then tasted them together, and they both changed, each changed the other. And I found that amazing. Something so simple like that I really never noticed before. So I became intrigued, and I did what any other student would do. I went out and I bought some wine. And being a poor student at the time, I was very unhappy to find out that 50% of what I bought I didn't like. So I thought, this is ridiculous. I'm rolling quarters for beer money. I'm in school, and I shouldn't be spending all this money on wine. So I went and I said, I'm going to buy myself a book. So I bought Wine for Dummies, and that was the first book I ever bought. Read it from cover to cover, loved it, was really good. And this over a progression of years of tasting and going to different things. And I finally decided, it was in 2009, that I started looking online for education. And I found, of all things, the Understanding Wine course by Wine Spectator. It was a course they offered online. It was multiple modules. So I studied that, and it wasn't enough. I wanted more. So there wasn't just one thing that kind of, I fell in. I sort of slowly slid down the rabbit hole. 2010 and 11, I did the intermediate advance with Joe Raya, who owned the Ginger, opening it, and he was the WSET coordinator or educator for the area. Actually, I think for the entire state. And in between the advanced and diploma is a huge jump. And of course, my wife and I talked about it. We knew that it would be a commitment. And I spent the next 2.5 years flying. I did an online lecture and tasted a lot of wine to get there. But it was the problem was, even after diploma level, now I'm doing these other, certified specialist wine, French wine scholar. It's just never enough. And you asked before about how anesthesia and wine intertwined for me. And I think it's a lot of people, whether it's wine or whatever your interest is, that in anesthesia, there's really something a little bit wrong with us, because we can never really get enough education. You never know everything about anesthesia, right? And it's a constant, continued, forever lifelong learning that you've dedicated yourself to that to be up to date and do the best you can for your patients. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I'm going to be studying wine and reading articles and geeking out probably till the day I die.
That's all. Well, and that leads me to my next question, which is what is required for keeping up all of these certifications that you've got?
Surprisingly, and it's interesting you should mention that, there's not. There's no continuing certification, education, or anything, and I think that might be coming down the road. And that's a disservice that I think we do again to the end consumer, because you have some people that really fall back on some of these old myths in wine and spirits that really we know now through technology and study and chemistry and things like that that they're just not true anymore. But old habits die hard. So there's a lot of mistruths in the industry, and I think we like I said, we do a disservice to the end consumer by not being continually educated.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. It's interesting that there isn't that sort of education
Mhm.
involved when you see it all over all kinds of other certifications, and maybe it is because we're not dealing with a life-threatening kind of thing,
Right.
but at the same time as everything else advances, yeah, I guess you would expect that
Mhm.
wine certifications would advance as well. So you've obviously been doing this for several years.
Yes.
If somebody's listening to this and they're very interested in doing what you do, what are the steps that you would suggest that they take? How would you suggest them going about it? What are some of the things that you maybe stumbled with along the way
Mhm.
that you learned from?
I guess early on, first of all, realize that you're never going to know it all. It's one of those things, like we said, it's lifelong education. But I would also say, kind of try to decide what you want to do, where in the industry you kind of find yourself. If you decide that you do want to work in prestigious restaurants, manage wine lists, do those kind of things, then, and I'm a big WSET fan, but then Court of Master Psalms is probably a better way for you to go, a more direct route. I would say that along the way, you can pick up some of the other educations from education bodies, certified specialist of wine. The Wine Scholar Guild does a great Italian, French, Spanish wine scholars and some master courses there as well. So there's other things that you can do along the way to supplement your education. I think I'm very lucky because I actually thought about going the Psalm route, and then someone told me about the WSET, which unfortunately, being international and much more popular in Europe, most people that I talk to about it have no idea what it is. So it's one of those things that I would say, do your education, find someone in the industry that does a job that may be similar to what you want to do, talk with them, find out what their education was, to try to help along those routes. Of course, there's some pitfalls. There are some things that you struggle with. I'd say just don't get frustrated. I mean, there's certain wines that I still in a blind tasting I still struggle with, and some friends who are masters of wine who are expert tasters and really fantastic at it will tell you, you know, there's some that and I'm not gonna tell you who they were, but there's some that were quite honest with me and said, "Man, I'm glad those wines weren't on my final exam because I would have struggled with that." So
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things that even the guys who are at the pinnacle of their careers, everyone has things that they're strong and things that they're weak in, and just stay the course, keep working at it, stay hard. There's the analogy of the Chinese man or the Japanese man that planted bamboo. Planted a bamboo seed and watered it, and everyone laughed at him and made fun of him. Right? He watered it every
Mm-hmm.
day for the scenario, right, for a number of years, and everyone laughed at him because nothing was coming out of the ground. He was watering a muddy piece of ground, and then one day, years later, the bamboo shot out of the ground, and it grew 3, 4, 5, 10 feet a day until it was 100 foot tall. So the question becomes, was the bamboo growing underground the whole time when he was watering it? Or did it just grow those last 3 days? And of course, you know the answer to that. Any business,
Yeah.
you got to continue to believe in it and plant it and water it, even when everyone around you doesn't see the growth potential. So,
Absolutely. Well, and you mentioned it being a business. So
mhm,
I'd like to go into a little more detail about how it is a business for you and how that looks for people getting started. What are the outlays and costs
mhm.
associated, and what you're trying to build this into, what that looks like in 5 or 10 years.
Okay. Well, it also depends on what avenue you're going with. I knew that I didn't want to open a retail shop. That's a full-time job. I have a full-time job, and I would have to be there all the time. So I focused on education and awareness and those types of things. And unfortunately, with a limited schedule, when you're taking call and you're working all these hours, you really can't commit to a full-time business in wine, which would be a lot more beneficial if you were going that route. So I chose something that I could control the amount of customers I had. I could control the amount of education that I did, whether I did it for a brick and mortar place that was promoting some dinners or changing their wine menu, or some in-home education and doing things like that. There are some not-for-profit organizations that have big events and venues that I will come in and work with the chef and develop an entire wine menu and pairing, and make those available for sale afterwards. So the retail establishment's happy with me because they're selling wines that I'm promoting. So I mean, it just depends on how you want to go about it. I can tell you from a financial standpoint, there's probably more work that I put into it than money that I've gotten out of it. So a lot of it has to do with passion of what I'm doing. Recently, I've changed gears with the whole COVID element and doing more online, and now with with Zoom, being able to do some of those. I've opened up to let me back up for a second. I also work with some PR companies and do some promotions for them. And with all the COVID, they connected me through Zoom with some winemakers. And so now I'm sitting here talking with winemakers, tasting their wine, asking them questions about decision-making lines along the process. And I thought, this is kind of interesting. I'm doing these wines. Been writing an article for 8 years, have a bunch of followers, have gotten feedback from all over the world. Believe it or not, I couldn't believe a small newspaper like Florence Morning News. But I guess you put it online, they have people looking for that, and have been able to talk to some winemakers from all over the world as well. So I thought we could monetize this, and spoke to an IT guy who's a good friend of mine, and revamping a website, because I was 100% wrong in thinking, man, if I made a really cool website and put really cool content on there, then sure, people would just love to come and flock and read that.
I know the feeling.
Not if you don't promote it. Not if you aren't promoting it. So now with a lot of people tied into social media, and enable us to do a email newsletter and really build the site the way we should have in the first place, and connecting that in the future with a YouTube channel and cross promoting all those things, I think our coverage area will grow. So that's sort of a plan down the road. And I was wrong. And obviously I'm not a business major, and anybody look back at that and say, well, of course it wasn't going to work. But, in my mind, it was going to work. But it was a little bit of a shortcoming there, oversight, maybe passion blinded the good decision making. But it's not about, failing in something like that. We're going to back up and restructure things. And I think it's got a really good outlook down the road.
Well, I think that's the biggest part of, that entrepreneurial mindset is, hey, sometimes you just got to go back to the drawing board. Something's not working. I've experienced that in my own business, and, things just don't turn out the way that you expect them to. The business doesn't look the way you expect it to. I started my own business approximately a year ago, and I have made a ton of changes in what I've expected for my business moving forward. Not just because of COVID, but because of just what, your customers want. And so, and I can speak with experience. I know that my neighbors got together and with their siblings and in-laws, and had, somebody who did a wine tasting with them, a wine and dinner tasting via Zoom through the COVID pandemic. So, that's a pretty cool thing to be able to do, that technology allows us to do nowadays.
You just touched on something there as well. And it's knowing your audience. And I think that's true across any type of business that you go in. I assume that, and wrongfully so, that everyone wanted to go down the rabbit hole. and geek out and study some of these things. And I realized that sometimes people just want to learn a little bit and drink some wine and have a good time and not really be bogged down by all the, the chemistry elements and things like that. I mean, I'm reading barrel reactions and at night, barrel reactions and what phenolics they're people don't care about that stuff. But you realize that that along the way, I thought everyone would do that. And luckily I had some really good friends that kind of put their hands on my back and said, man, you really know a lot about this, but sometimes people just want to know this much instead of this much and have a good time. And I thought, you know what? He's exactly right. I really needed to, I'll tell you a quick little funny story, and you can edit this out if it doesn't, but about knowing your audience. I have a very good friend who invited us over for a Christmas Eve dinner. I mean, just a ridiculous amount of food, amazing, 7 courses. I mean, just all this crazy stuff. So of course, I was bringing the wine, and he had family there. I brought a couple cases of wine for that night. And I saved one of these really, really nice aged Italian Barolos for the final course and the end of the evening. And we poured it, and I poured some with his father, and we sat in there sipping it. And I thought, oh God, this is what I waited. This is amazing. And his father said, it was very expensive wine. And I only bought one bottle. It was just for the couple of us in the kitchen, while everyone else had their wine.
Yeah.
But he said, this is good, but I know what it needs. And I said, oh, what's that? And he took a spoonful of sugar and put it in the wine and stirred it up.
Oh my goodness.
And I looked and I went, know your audience.
That's it. Oh my gosh. That's a great story.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
I bet you've seen a few things too, throughout your years in this business. So
I have, and let me tell you, I make fun of that, but I also tell consumers that, don't worry about what a wine expert or what someone tells you should be drinking, even a wine judge or, certainly there are aspects from wine judging that we look at the intricacies of whether wine is technically good, as far as balance and things like that. But I tell people, if someone's telling you, here's $100 Cabernet, isn't it great? And you taste it and you go, no, I can't stand it. There's nothing wrong with your palate.
mm-hmm.
That's okay. Everyone is completely different with what they like and what they don't like. I tell people, find the wine that you like for about the price that you feel comfortable paying and drink the stink out of it. And don't worry about what any expert tells you. I mean, that's honestly the best advice I can give. Now, I do try to get people outside their comfort zone by moving laterally and saying, oh, you like this? Well, why don't we try this or try that? So getting people to kind of try different things. But if you don't like it, there's nothing wrong with your palate. I've heard a wine expert one time tell someone that, oh, once you have a more developed palate, you'll appreciate this. That is a horrible thing to say. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. It's something that, I mean, obviously we all grow and change as time goes on, but that doesn't mean you have to in every single aspect of your life. My dad still drinks Bud Light, and that's what he likes to drink. That's fine. There's no problem with that. You find what you like, and I like that. You drink the stink out of it.
That's right.
So
there's a reason why Budweiser's a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, they know their audience.
They know their audience.
So, but
Yep.
well, man, I have loved this conversation. This has been so great, and I wanted to give you a chance if there's anything else you'd like to add here at the end. Any kind of advice you'd like to give anybody that's thinking about this field. Now's the time, and I'll let you go to it.
Yeah, I think business in general, I see not only CRNAs, but other people have a great idea. And unfortunately, the business world is full of failures with really great ideas. So I'd say if you have a really good idea, something that you're passionate about, take it out, kick it around a little bit in the yard and really test it, really think about it and do a full business plan. So many people do not take the time to write out that 26-page business plan that isn't sexy and it's laborious and it's a hard thing to do, but doing that will really help you identify not only your SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but also really help you to rethink exactly what your business is. And I wish I would have done that early on, because I would have realized that I was trying to be a little bit of everything for everybody. And that's hard to do. You really need to have a focus of what you're going to do, what your product is or what your service is.
Mm-hmm.
And you obviously can branch out from there. But I was trying to be too many things and spread myself in too many different directions, and it didn't work. So that would be one of my things that I would give some advice on. So not that, like I said, not that I'm a business expert, but I've seen a lot of people with a lot of great ideas just not put the time in to really kind of see if it's a good idea for your area or for, your industry.
That's fantastic. Well, Dennis, it's been a pleasure to have you. How can our listeners get a hold of you? How can they find out more about you?
Okay. Well, certainly, like you said, scnow.com, and you can search my name. You can search Bottle Talk, or you can search my name, Dennis Fraley. And there's 7.5 years worth of articles on there. So if you ever have trouble sleeping at night, that would be one of the things I would say. Also, we will be putting out some information in a newsletter that will announce new content coming out, new articles coming out, and any of the YouTube videos that we'll be doing as well. So if you want to get on that list, you can send me your email, and all you have to do is say, add me to the list. And that would be my name, Dennis, DENNIS, at The Bottle Talk, THE bottletalk.com.
Fantastic. Dennis, again, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such a pleasure, and you've had such a great knowledge base here to draw from. So I really appreciate your time today.
Well, Bobby, thanks for having me. Like I said, I think you got a really great concept here, and I'm actually interested in following you and seeing what some other CRNAs are doing out there. I think that as a community, we get so bogged down in anesthesia all the time, which is fine. It's what we do for a living. But it's really interesting to see what people are doing outside, the person behind the mask, so to speak, right?
Absolutely. Or those of us leading double lives. Wow, what a great discussion. There were several moments that stuck out to me, but first and foremost is Dennis's pursuit of knowledge driven by the passion that he has for wine and spirits. This is a central theme with so many of the guests that we have. They are truly passionate about their plan B and the value that they can provide to others. Dennis's entrepreneurial mindset was on display as he discussed formulating a business plan while also being open to full-scale adjustments along the way. This includes narrowing your focus and really honing in on your audience. The more you get to know your particular audience, the better you can serve them along the way. That's going to do it for us today. I hope you'll join me next time on the Plan B CRNA podcast. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On-Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On-Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.